Hello everybody, how are you doing? We just got back from a lacrosse tournament. We left Friday evening and drove up to Indianapolis, had games all day Saturday, got up this morning, had games this morning, so it was a very busy weekend. We drove back and I'm out in the shop for a little bit. I don't know if I'm going to tackle the body today of the pin or if I'm just going to kind of work on a few odd and end things just to kind of, give me something to do. I really want to focus on that. A couple of comments. Great interaction with the video. I got a lot of positive interaction. A couple people asked, well, how come you're doing it the hard way? You're cranking it by hand. Why aren't you using the feed? I really haven't learned how to use the feed yet. I know you just flip it on and let it go, but you've got to be careful about turning it on and turning it off so you don't run the saddle into the headstock, and also you've got to work with the gearing a little bit to make sure that you've got it geared properly so you get a nice smooth transition down the piece. And I haven't taken the time to teach myself yet. That will be coming. I want to learn that because it will simplify the process. And then a number of people commented about the tenon, the 10mm tenon. I did that the hard way. Well, yes, I did. I did it the extreme hard way because I have a tool from Jim Hines that will cut that perfect tenon in literally like 3 seconds. It's so quick. The problem is the Jacobs chuck, my lathe has a #1 Morse taper in the tailstock. The only Jacobs chuck I have is a small, I think it's a 1/2 inch Jacobs chuck. And so I went and ordered a 3/4 inch Jacobs chuck with a #1 Morse taper. It just has not arrived yet. So it hopefully will get here sometime this week. That'll enable me to use that tenon tool. That was the first attempt I made at doing that from start to finish only on this lathe. My hope is to learn some new techniques, learn a little more about the lathe, improve the process, and be able to produce them better. And I'm not so concerned about faster because I'm not really a production house kind of place. I'm a guy who just likes to make these as a hobby for fun. So speed is not my ultimate objective, but my ultimate objective is a very fine finished product. I want to make the best pin that I can make. So anyway, that's enough about that. We'll see what happens. I don't know if I'll work on the body or not. We'll see. But I just got out here and I want to show you guys something. I have this on a mount, so I'm not jumping around a whole lot because I want to show this album. I'm going to be playing a little Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. And this is I guess I should have turned it right side up. This is a triple album set. And I got to be careful. I don't want the album dropping out the middle. But this is something you don't get with a CD. Take a look at that inside cover. Oh, there comes the album. I don't want to drop it. It slides out the bottom in the middle there. And, whoops. This is an insane album. It's incredibly good. I cannot wait to get it on the turntable. We're going to start with record 1 and just play through. And if we don't get them all done today, next time I'm in the shop, I'll pick up where I left off. But Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, look them up. They're amazing. Woo! It's hot out here today, man. I'm having some fun. I'm going to show you what I'm doing in a second. I am 2 songs, or about 1.5 songs from finishing side 3 of a 6-side set here. And the music is great. It's reminiscent of, kind of old Hank Williams, honky tonkin' songs like that. I mean, it's sort of a cross between rock and then a real old storytelling country. So it's enjoyable music. Let me flip around and show you what I'm doing. I'm just experimenting tonight, and what I'd like to do is I would like to make a pin that can house a cross refill. And I've taken a bunch of measurements, and I'm sure there's going to be a bunch more. I've pulled a tap and a die out of a standard tap and die set because I don't have anything really fancy there. I've turned down a tenon here on a piece of aluminum, and the die I'm going to use is 1/4 NF28. So this is measured actually in inches right now, and instead of being 0.25, it's actually 0.26. It's a hair over, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. The tap should cut, or the die should cut right through it. What I'm going to do now is I got to do some measurements for the interior of this, how deep I drill into it to be able to house my refill. I've got a standard cross refill here, and the diameter at the tip is 5/64, and the main diameter of the body is 1/8 of an inch. And what I need to do is figure out how much of this I want to stick out the end of my nib section. And I've got a total length here. Of course, that is in millimeters. I can very easily convert that to inches. But then we need to drill down far enough to where this can stick out past the end. So I need to drill in 1/8 of an inch to this depth, And what that will do is build a shoulder in there. I'll drill the rest of the way with the 5/64" bit, and we should be able to make a nice nib. Once I get that drilled out, I'll take my I'll take my die, and I will go ahead and put threads on the end of this tenon. Then I'll build a mandrel using the tap that I can flip this around, thread it into the mandrel, and I'll be able to turn down the outside shape of the nib, which will look something like this. That's a lot. It's a lot of math. It's a lot of figuring. You know, once again, I'm doing this all by hand, and quite honestly, I've been thinking about, you know, when you work with one of these metal lathes, you have a lot of time to think. You know, I mean, not while the lathe is working, but in between processes. And I know I could use the automatic feed, and I need to learn how to do that. But I think in the meantime, me doing this all manually is actually beneficial, because I'm really having to pay a close attention to the increments. Every time I adjust something, how far is that going to, you know, move the sled in or out? Or the saddle in or out, I'm sorry. Things like that are important to understand, and then later on I can come back and add the sled to my arsenal of capability on this lathe. So I'm gonna get back to work, do a little bit of math, figure out the depth, and then we will come back and show you where we get. Probably mess this first one up. I think I'll probably drill too far or whatever. You know, that's just par for the course. I'm not overly concerned about that. The main thing is we learn, because we'll come back and we'll do one of these for real, and we'll video it for you guys. Now, when I do the real one, will I do it in aluminum or will I do it in acrylic? I don't know. Maybe I'll take a vote later on and see what you guys think. Hang tight, and I'll show you how far I get tonight. Well, guys, I think I may have to stop with this for tonight. I think I got the right idea, and I'm moving in the right direction, but the issue is I have a very old set of taps. I picked them up used, and I think they're just really chewed up. I was using the 1/4 NF28, which should be a finer thread, and I couldn't get it to bite. It just kept chewing the end off of the aluminum tenon. So I switched over, let's just go with a larger thread. So I went to 1/4 NF20, and same thing, it just won't bite to start. And as you look in there, the threads are relatively flat. So I think that's probably why I got such a good price on it used. Picked it up at a thrift shop. My guess is it probably is just wore out. Now this was the initial one I was working on, and as I drilled the 1/8 hole through, what I found was this one was a tiny bit too short. So I cut off a larger piece, put it in there. I got the tenon turned, I drilled 1/8 of an inch in, finished out with the 5/64. And then I was just at the point of trying to cut the threads. Now, I did recently buy a new tap. Oh, shucks, it's the tap is 1/4 20 as well. So I think what I'm going to have to do is probably invest in probably a 1/4 NF24 tap and die, because I want something smaller. You know, I don't want this pin to be fat because it's using a cross refill. So I probably will go in, hop online, and purchase a tap and a die. I think this is going to be fun when I can figure it out, because I'll be able to use the tap and die for the cap as well. And then my plan is to make a nib, make a cap, and then to cut a tube, and I'll thread it at both ends. That way I can take the tube and I can size it down to where, as I put the nib in, or the ink refill in, and tighten the cap, I should have no play. See, so I can just slowly take a tiny bit off the end at a time until I get it perfect, and then with the initial measurements I have for the nib and the cap, I'll be able to get exact measurements for the length of the tube. So keep your eyes open for that. Like I said, I got to buy a couple tools, and then we'll get back out on this and try to make that happen. All right, it has been a long time since I've picked up the camera today to film anything for you. And what I've been doing is trying to figure out the gearing on this lathe. I would like to set up to cut 24 teeth per inch, and I've removed all of the gears, and of course some of them I put back on. What I've got is a 56 tooth gear on the screw drive, or on the end of the screw, and I've got a 64 tooth gear in position B. Now this is what it says in the manual should give me 24 teeth per inch. Now this is the forward and reverse, this is neutral, and then this is going to send it away from the headstock, and this bottom one will bring it toward the headstock. So if we flip it on, let me just take the switch here. a little bit of an issue with it wanting to stop. That is really, really weird. Going away from the headstock, it's moving fine. Coming towards the headstock, it works for a bit, and then it sort of dies out and stops moving. I gotta stop and take a look. There's a clamp nut in there that clamps onto the screw. I'm gonna take a look at that and make sure that it doesn't have a bunch of garbage in it, or that also that it's, you know, it's not super tight, but it's tight enough to where when it grips, it's getting a good grip. A while back, I took a piece of wire and I put, oh shucks, brake cleaner, sorry, I lost it for a second, on the screw, and I put a piece of wire in there, and I ran the lathe and ran the wire all the way down, back and forth in the screw to clean all the gunk out of the screw, and I kept hitting it with the brake cleaner. It got it nice and clean, and then I lubed it up. But I hadn't really used the screw, so I don't know what the problem is. I'm going to take a look at the little clamp. Let me show you what I mean. This little knob right here, you flip it down, and it locks together a clamp, a threaded clamp, onto the screw. Raise it up, and it releases that clamp. I'm going to do some checking and make sure that clamp, I don't understand why it wants to go one way but not the other. I wouldn't think that would matter, but I'm going to do a little experiment and try to figure that out. If I can get it figured out and working okay, then what we'll do is we will go ahead, chuck up a piece of aluminum, and we will attempt to put 24 threads per inch on it. I don't have anything large enough to thread that into, but I do have a thread gauge. It came with the tap and die set, the cheap one. That it actually was probably a nice one when it was bought, but it's, you know, like I said, it's pretty old. It looks like it's been rode hard and put up wet, but it does still have a thread gauge in there, and that thread gauge will be perfect. I'll be able to test those threads and know what the pitch is. So I'm going to do a little bit of work and see if I can't get this working a little better on the screw. I've removed this entire carriage from the lathe, and you can kind of see the threads in there. This is what grips the screw. So when you engage this, whichever direction the screw is turning, that causes the carriage to move in that direction. And if you look in there, you can see that the threads are not the best. I think they're a little worn. I'm really hoping that's something I can find at, say, Little Machine Shop or someplace like that. I think what I'm gonna do first is kind of look and see if there's any type of an adjustment that I can make on them. And if there is, great, we'll try that. I think what it is, I think they're just, I don't want to say they're stripped because they're not completely gone, but they look very shallow. They don't look deep. So I think when they grip the screw, somewhere along the lines, maybe all that crap in the screw that was plugging it up was keeping them from getting a good grip, and they were sort of moving along the threads and just wearing out the insert there. So I don't know. Hey, if anybody out there has a line on those, or if anybody out there knows of a way to do some adjustment to them, let me know. I'm just trying to, I'm going to weigh my options here and see what I got to do to get that fixed. So, hey, it's always something, isn't it? I gave it a good cleaning. You can see, let me actually open it up a little bit. There we go. You can see the threads look a lot better. They're not as chewed up as I thought they were once I cleaned them out. So what I'm concerned about is, let me get a good shot here. When this clamps down, it could clamp a little tighter. I don't think it's actually clamping tight enough, and that's allowing it to slip. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take these screws out, take it apart, and look on the inside of it and see if there's any adjustments. There is a screw here, but what that does is lock it in the down position. So I guess if you're doing an operation where you're going to be using only the screw, that keeps it from opening and closing. You can't move the handle anymore. It just locks it in one position. Like I said, I'm no expert on this. A lot of you guys who do machine work probably can give me a very detailed description of this, how it works and how to fix it. I'm just kind of learning as I go. So let me start taking this apart and see what I can come up with. Well, I took everything apart, and I've got a little more movement here now with this lever that I didn't have before. Here are the nuts that are the clamp nuts.
you can see they got pretty decent thread in there. It's a little bit worn. What I'm going to do is I cleaned them. I got a dental pick out and I cleaned all of the threads out. I cleaned off the cap that holds them in place. I'm going to go ahead and lube this up, and then we're going to get these put back together, and we'll put it back on the lathe and see if we have any better luck. All right, everybody, here's the story. I went ahead, I cleaned it out. I used that dental pick. I got all the garbage out of it. I put it back together, lubed it up, put it back together, and it's still not moving. It's still slipping. And what I think the problem is if I look at the threads inside of that clamp nut, they don't have a point on the end of them like the screw does. They're flat. So I think what probably happened is I cleaned so much garbage off that screw. I think that screw probably had stuff caked in it, dirt, whatever. And I think it kept it from clamping tightly. It allowed it to slip a little bit, so it probably worked for a while, but as it went back and forth, it just wore the ends of those teeth off. So I think that's the problem, because it's a tight clamp. It's just, it slides, that you can actually move it on the screw. So I just think they're wore out. So I'm going to get a part number out of my book over here. I'll go online and I'll see if I can't locate a fresh set of those. This is about it for me. I need to get in. I got to get cleaned up, man. I got meetings all next week. I got people in from all over the place, and man, I just got to get all this grease off of me. But this is what I love doing. I'd rather be out here being greasy. You know, it's just so much fun. But I'm going to go ahead and wipe the lathe down, oil it all up a little bit so there's no chance of rust, and then I'm calling it quits. Thanks for hanging out with me. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you guys again very, very soon. Hey guys, I know I already signed off, but I went in the house and I was cleaning up before I came out and shut everything down. And I want to let you guys know that as of right now, the metal lathe will be down for a while. This is the base from my quick change tool post, and this is the base from my old or my existing tool post. And I'm getting ready to ship these off to a gentleman, a machinist, who said that he'd be more than happy to machine these for me. So I'm going to be getting that done. So I won't have a tool post holder, so I can't really turn anything on the lathe. I did get the part numbers for the half nuts, and I'm going to go in and try to order those. So I kind of figure I got to wait for those to come in too. It does kind of slow me down on some projects, but you know what? When it's done and I get that quick change tool post on there, and I can have a couple of tools on there already centered and just flip them around to, you know, to dial them in and use them, that's going to make all the difference in the world. So I just want to give you guys a quick update on that. And with that, I'm officially now out. Have a great evening.